Sophia Dials. I want you to imagine what you're doing at 14 years old. Probably thinking about your crush or your math homework or something else mundane. Today, 14 years old is the average age of a girl entering prostitution, according to World Without Exploitation, a nonprofit. Today, I'll be talking about prostitution, its relation to human trafficking, and how these problems can be prevented with the implementation of something known as the Nordic model for prostitution. First, let's examine the issues that go along with prostitution and the sex trade. The problem with prostitution. Prostitution is inherently exploitative, dangerous, and preys upon those who are most vulnerable. Most people entering prostitution are not doing so out of a conscious decision, but out of inopportunities they experience. Prostitutes experience high rates of violence and trauma, as well as other various dangers, including homelessness. According to a 130-person study conducted by Dr. Melissa Farley for the nonprofit Prostitution Research and Education Organization, as adults in prostitution, 82% had been physically assaulted, 83% had been threatened with a weapon, 68% had been raped while working as prostitutes, and 84% reported current or past homelessness. These are not the only statistics that are rather shocking when it comes to prostitution. According to World Without Exploitation, 92.2% of trafficked women involved in one study reported being subjected to physical violence, such as being shot, strangled, burned, beaten, stabbed, or punched. And many of these victims experience multiple forms of violence. Not only is prostitution violence towards those involved, but it also preys upon children as well. According to the nonprofit Arc of Hope for Children, 2 million children are subjected to prostitution in the global commercial sex trade, and up to 300,000 Americans under the age of 18 are lured into the commercial sex trade every year. Another study called the Garden of Truth, which is a case study of prostitution on all the Native American women in Minnesota, 39% of those surveyed said they entered prostitution as minors. So not only is prostitution physically violent towards adults, but also children as well. Next, I'll explain why the legalization of prostitution fails to remedy these problems. First, I'm going to present you this graph, though, which basically shows the marginalized backgrounds that prostitutes come from. This is from the Nordic Model Now website, and this is a typical results. Looked after children are basically children who enter state care at some point. As you can see, 50% started before they were 18, 50% were homeless. There's coercion and the high rates of child abuse that are also involved with women who are in prostitution. But we're going to come back to legalization. Is legal prostitution the answer? And with the data that I looked over, no. In areas where prostitution is legal, disparities still exist. In Amsterdam, they legalized prostitution in the year 2000, and many of Amsterdam's sex workers are marginalized minorities and immigrants, and there's no way to say whether coercion is involved or trafficking is involved. According to women's rights advocate Julie Bindel, the sex industry in Amsterdam has been shaped by the huge influx of desperate, vulnerable women coming to the EU from Eastern Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia to work in legal zones. And according to a nonprofit, Humanity in Action, it states that 60% of the Netherlands' 8,000 to 11,000 sex workers are non-Dutch. So basically what this data shows is that a lot of these women are coming from other countries. They're coming from impoverished countries to perform sex work because they don't have any opportunities where they're from. And therefore they don't have any opportunities at all. So basically they're being forced into sex work because they have no other options. This is the best option for them. And the thing is, when you bring up that factor, you have to reconcile, is that actual consent? Is that actual liberation involved, or is it their only option? Another point I would like to make is the effects of legalized prostitution versus the Nordic model. According to a study conducted by the Harvard Law and International Development Society, countries with legalized prostitution are associated with both higher influxes of human trafficking and higher instances of children trafficking. And then the same study also makes a point to say the criminalization of prostitution in Sweden resulted in the shrinking of the prostitution market and the decline of human trafficking inflows. And in Sweden they have the Nordic model, which I will talk about next. The Nordic model is what I believe to be the most effective approach to prostitution. Basically, the Nordic model works by criminalizing sex buyers, but decriminalizing prostitution. So women have a way to get out of prostitution, ways to report things without getting criminalized for it, and the people who are buying sex and exploiting them are the ones getting, charged with things. According to the organization Nordic Model now, the Nordic Model makes it clear that buying people for sex is wrong and has sanctions to discourage people from doing it. The Nordic Model was passed in Sweden in 1999 and has now been passed in 7 countries. 10 years after its induction in Sweden, prostitution was basically halved. In countries where the Nordic Model is legal, prostitution and human trafficking decreases, which also includes the trafficking of children. In an article written by Janice Turner for the New York Times in 1999, she talks about how the number of Swedish prostitutes has halved, and how not only this curbs prostitution by helping women get out, but it also decreases the demand for prostitution completely. In summary, we can see that prostitution greatly impacts marginalized women and girls around the world. Legalized prostitution does not solve these issues, and the Nordic Model is the most viable and supportive solution. I would say I've managed to open your eyes to the bitter and harsh realities of the sex trade shown, and why the Nordic Model approach is the only way to handle the epidemic of prostitution and sex trafficking. And I also like to include this quote by Rachel Moran. Rachel Moran was a prostitute in Ireland. She started when she was 15 years old, and now she is an anti-prostitution advocate and sex work survivor. Thank you.